Episode 62 of the Church Digital Podcast, powered by Stadia Church Planning. Guys, congratulations. We did it. We survived Easter. A month ago, people were freaking out about this whole church online thing, and then we went and did the impossible. We did the Super Bowl. We did the biggest Sunday of the year and did it in a church online environment. You out there, the creative geniuses, the online pastors, the executive pastors, the lead pastors, the volunteer, each of you did a phenomenal job to help these services happen online. You all should be applauded for what happened as a result of it. It was funny, while I was doing this recording, I actually had a text come in from a friend of mine who's connected with Life Church, works on the church online platform, that project. And so I've got some stats. I don't think these are final stats, but this is just even where we are in the midst of Sunday when I'm doing this recording. 11.4 million people watched a church service on the church online platform. Of those, 57,000 services have been executed on the church online platform. Over 70,000 salvations as a result of it. 134 countries. By the way, this is like 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday the 12th. We're still in the midst of Easter Sunday, and we're already seeing stats like this coming in, and I'm sure it's going to skyrocket. By the way, I'm not sure if we had did all physical services, I don't think we would have reached 134 countries. And there's this interesting merger between physical and digital. Now, look, we really know how to do the physical church service. We've been doing the physical church service as a church. We've been doing them for centuries, the physical church service. I think, gun to our head, we've been trying to figure out how to do the church online service, the digital church service well. The conversation that I want to have today is, what does it look like to do both well? What does it look like to take the church online, the digital aspect, and then the physical aspect, and do it well together so that it's a merger of physical and digital? What if, and I'm just, hey, let's just make up a word, because that's what we do, right? What if we're looking at a Phygital church? One that marries physical and digital together with that. What are the differences? What are the strengths and weaknesses? What are the opportunities that we have to combine? And what would that do for us, the church, long term? Listen, we made it past getting all our church services online. We made it past Easter, which was one giant hurdle that we as a church had. We've got an opportunity now to do the next thing. And that's develop a strategy for the church that is merging physical and digital together. A Phygital strategy for the church. That's the challenge before you. And to this end, we're bringing in a podcast, a conversation. We've got Jay Kranda from Saddleback Church, one of the OGs right now of Church Online, original gangster. In case like you're not up with the lingo, I try to stay cool at 42. Jay's coming back in, no stranger to the podcast. He was actually one of the first guests we had on the podcast a year ago. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. And then we're also bringing in co-host of the podcast here, digital pastor of Christ Fellowship Miami, Ray DeArmas, in a conversation that I'm calling Tomorrow's Phygital Strategy. All right, everybody, here we go. Who would have won the NBA Finals this year?
Oh, I actually think it would have been the Lakers.
You think?
I actually do. Yeah.
Would this have been the year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, when you say the year, I mean, we've had many years, so you don't need to tell us.
Oh my
like we don't need.
I am sorry, sir. I did not mean to offend you when I said that.
I know.
It's a pretty storied history over there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not. Trust me, there's no drought. So here we're good. But I think the Lakers had and I know I'm biased. I think they had a legitimate chance to do it considering everything. But you never know. The playoffs were deep this year. The teams were deep. I think there were like 4 teams that legitimately could have, if they would have gotten on fire, which is all you need. You just need 4. You need 4 games, man. That's all you need. So
it's true. I think it would have been you guys or the Clippers. I think either way the trophy would have stayed in Los Angeles. Whoever came out of the West was going to win. Just because, to me, Antetokounmpo is going to leave. Like the Bucks just don't have enough. That's going to be that. But I think LeBron gets his 3rd championship with the 3rd team, solidifying yet another piece on his resume for history.
Yeah. Now you're depressing me, Jeff. Now I'm like, now we gotta now I gotta wait, because most likely they're not gonna play. I know that they're trying to make stuff happen in July, but
Are
I
they
don't know.
really? I hadn't heard. Like
At
what?
sea, at sea.
I know. Well, like they're trying. It's like what's his name from the UFC. Like they're trying to buy the island. He's trying to like buy an island so he can
Yeah,
go
Dana
and
White.
have. Yeah, he's trying to have fights on an island somewhere. But people are not. I mean, the thing is, I was listening to something yesterday, and they were talking about like I guess they did WrestleMania with nobody.
Yes, an empty room.
I didn't watch it, but they said it was kind of weird. Everybody was just like, it's definitely super strange. So I don't know. I don't know how a team. I watched a couple nights ago the old the Utah Bulls games, and I totally forgot the Utah. I remember the thing with the Utah games was how loud the arena was because it was all up on it. Like it was just kind of a weird. It was like a tight arena, and they kept going to shots of the noise level in the arena, which I know that was a thing Utah did forever, but it was funny because it wasn't a digital meter. It was like an actual shot of like a real meter, like somewhere like because they couldn't do it digitally. So it just kept shotting to this camera shot. I was like, they felt so old. But I'm like, yeah, I don't know how in a quiet arena where you could hear everything, it would be really strange. And playoffs are such a momentum. Yeah. There is something about basketball when it's loud and it's just I don't know how that would be, and I don't know how it would affect the teams, and I don't know how you would have to essentially lock everybody down. You would have to say, hey guys, we're playing in this area, you can't leave, like and you're just stuck here for the next for the next
week,
month.
2 weeks.
Yeah, and would people really want to do that? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, the other thing Jay is not just the players themselves, right? Like it's their staff, it's the coaches, it's a whole lot of folks. Yeah, it's a lot of folks that you have to have under wraps for quarantine for all this stuff. But I agree with you. Look, when we talk about wrestling, like when I was in college, I went to go see the filming of Monday Night Raw here in Miami.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And man,
sweet.
This was during the Stone Cold Rock era when they were both huge. And man, what an amazing experience! But I saw some of the clips of WrestleMania and stuff. Dude, you take the crowd out of it. It's like 70% of wrestling is gone. It's just awkward.
Yeah. You can't. That's the thing. We have, we moved next to our closest friends, and so we've been like in quarantine with each other, kind of. But another friend lives on the same street, and they have kids that are older, and one of the kids is kind of like he's not obeying to any of the rules. And so we had a conversation today about like, okay, our friend's son, Jacob, I was like his small group leader in high school. Like, I love Jacob, but like he's going in and out he's not obeying to anything. And so now he's going to be going to have this weird conversation. Like, we're going to have to tell him like, he can't just come over to our house because essentially if he wants to break the rules, he can, but we are in self quarantine right now, like between our families. And so and you're risking because our friend's mom is going to come stay with them, and she's high risk essentially. And so so this is how are you going to control all these teams, all their kids, all their families? Like, so you really have to have those type of conversations. Oh, so your daughter who's in college wants to go to the local coffee shop and just grab something, come back. Like, did she wear a mask? Are you doing the temperature stuff? Are you going to do what China's doing with the green, yellow card stuff where like, that's how they're like, I know it's possible, but like, I know they have to go into a players agreement deal. They have to go to the players association and go like, cause it is infringing in people's rights. Like it's a big thing. And so it's like, it's going to be interesting, but regardless, we have to figure it out here in the next month or so as they start lifting stuff. If Americans just wear masks, we probably can go back to some activity, but will people obey is the real issue. So
that our autonomy has always kind of been the issue at this. And I find it very spiritual, like on one side, because like the Bible that we study is actually Eastern in thought. And so there's a lot more thought in terms of how an individual's actions affect the community. When this whole thing happened, the instant thing that was insulted was everybody's autonomy, was everybody's individual rights. Like no government's going to tell me that I can't worship at church in person.
Yeah.
Are you not thinking Christologically about how your actions affect the community? That's the struggle.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
when we get past coronavirus, when life gets back to whatever normal is, what does church look like? What does culture look like around us? Like we're talking about, WWE, WWF, and the Rock doing his hand thing to the ear. Are you smelling what the Rock's cooking in the kitchen? Whatever the line is. It's been so long since I watched that stuff. I was more of a Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior kind of like that was my heyday.
Golden age.
Way back when. And so like you're right. Take that out of the equation, out of that physical environment where you're just watching it online. There is a piece of it where you need that physical component, but without having the online part, without it being broadcast, you're definitely losing a lot of reach. And so there's this tension, and I can't believe I'm drawing an analogy of church to WWE. I did not plan this when I started this podcast. But you've got this tension, right, between, all right, so let's go all the way back to the way that it was before coronavirus, where all these churches aren't having anything to do with online. Okay, you can maybe do that. I don't even know that you can do that because I think culture is swinging so far the other way towards having more digital, more technology, more community centered around these technology pieces. So like I think there's a balance between the two. Like when you think at what is culture going to look like post coronavirus, when you think how can the church respond to this? Jay Kranda, Ray DiArmas, two of the smartest people I know, which is why I wanted you on this podcast. What are you thinking about? What does the future look like?
I was actually just thinking how you kind of look like Jake the Snake. I was just like,
that's awesome. Yeah,
you got the look a little bit. So, but anyways, it's a good question. I go to two places. I definitely think that a lot of people are going to immediately leverage Zoom for a lot more things. I think there was a quote today that I was reading in an article, and he was talking about kind of this idea of what the coronavirus is doing. And I'll just read it. It was from Ben Thompson. He says, the coronavirus crisis will not so much foment drastic changes as it will accelerate trends that were already happening. Changes that might have taken 10 to 15 years simply because of the stickness of the status quo may now happen in far less time. And so he was talking about like cutting cords. So if people have cable because of live streaming of sports and there's no live sports, a lot of people might immediately be forced into a corner to go, oh wow, like I don't really need this. I can get everything on Netflix or whatever. And I think churches are realizing like, oh wow, like we can do meetings online. We can do support groups online. We can do coaching online. I was kind of joking that right now, if you get let go at your church and you need to get hired at a church, right now you could really get hired anywhere. Like any church is doing remote, remote stuff. Now they might not want to do that, or they might not have the funds right now to do that. So it's not really a good time for that to happen. But I do think there's a lot of people just realizing, oh wow, like a lot of this stuff is working. Now the flip side, I do also feel that there's a lot of people that this might give them justification to not do things online after this, because they might go, this didn't work for us, or I didn't see this. And I actually think a lot of that is coming from the confusion around metrics. I don't feel like a lot of people are like, they're looking at all this stuff and they're like, wow, a lot of people are watching this, or this isn't working. And I think if you didn't have the platform set up for this pre-COVID-19, and all of a sudden everybody has to watch on Facebook and YouTube and on your website, whatever. If you didn't have that platform set up, you're having to remessage a bunch of people where to go. And the people that already had that, it was seamless. Like for us, we already had a platform. We had, subscribers, we had things. And so people automatically knew where to go. And I think a lot of people, the first couple of weeks have been painful. And I am scared that might give them reason to not reinvest. And I feel like both camps kind of exist. I do feel like more people will leverage it. I feel like that camp's larger, but I am a little nervous for what people will do after this and might stop doing some things just because they said, oh, look, we did that, and it didn't really work that great.
I'm actually a little more optimistic, even though I agree with you. I think that things will change, and I'm glad that you cited that article because I couldn't agree more. This really it advanced us a lot quicker than what we had thought in terms of arriving at this point. I was telling Jeff earlier that we were so happy that 90% of our physical groups actually transitioned to an online environment during this time, which was bigger than what I thought would happen. And so that right there, but there were already exactly what you're saying, Jay. We had a lot of the things in place. We know how to do this. We've done this already in other environments. We've taken our services online. We've taken small groups online. We've got membership online. We've got like so many different things that are possible that people can encounter these environments in an online process. Most of our church was already onboarded to online giving. So some of those things were already in place. And for the churches that were not, this was very difficult. Now, the reason I say I'm more optimistic is because I think that churches now, both church plants and moving forward, and even those that are going to be replants, are now going to have in mind that they need to have at least some kind of presence in the digital environment. Even if they're not going to stream their services, their pastors are going to be more conscientious of the fact of, man, I've got to stay connected with my people during the 1-6-7, all those hours of the week. I think that's going to be a primary engagement driving factor kind of moving forward. Whether it's going to be through social media platforms or something else. And it's not even going to be, before they would like insult people saying, oh, well, that's just celebrity stuff. That's just people trying to accentuate themselves. I think now they recognize, oh no, there's a need for my people to be connected on a regular basis throughout the week to pastoral community, to have somebody shepherding them there in that kind of way. And so that's something that I could see that hangs around for a long time moving forward in church leadership.
Yeah, that's a good, I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking of a lot of church plants and people coming out of seminary right now. And I got an email from somebody just yesterday that they're graduating from seminary and they're wanting to plant a church online. And I'm thinking there's a lot of these people that are finishing up school, or maybe, you know, there's a friend here locally that planted a church, and I'm just thinking, oh man, what a terrible time to be like cut off from a lot of the financial support, because it's like, you know, churches that have been going for a couple of years, you're going to generally have some base, but if you're just launching or just launched, it's going to be really rough. But I am excited for the people thinking about planting churches. Instead of getting so wrapped up in just picking a location and a building, you know, more people are going to go, oh, wow, maybe we should just start streaming and start doing this. And the barrier of entry is a lot lower now. And I like that, because I think it gets them thinking digital really early.
Yep.
Yeah, let me pitch in something on that, because like, and I'm going to put on my Stadia hat here for a second. There are some phenomenal stories that are coming out of Stadia. Next week we're going to have Patrick. He's a church planner. The man's not even living in the city where his church is planning yet, and he's utilizing Facebook groups and church online to ramp up his actual ministry, and how he's got like even today he started rolling out his strategy for how he's using local Facebook groups to connect with people, trying to get exposure to meet and to funnel them in. It's phenomenal, the stuff that he's doing, and he's not even located within the city that he's trying to reach. There are people that we're going to be doing blogs with and going to write content. There's guys who were scheduled to launch their church in the fall, and they're looking at like the ramp up of what's happening in the season, and they're like, yeah, we want to roll sooner. Like, let's launch now. We're not prepared for physical, but let's do ministry now, because this is where people need us. And so it's amazing to me, because some people, there's a mix. I've seen both. There's some people who are like, I don't even know what's going on right now. I'm going to pause and I'm going to delay. And then at the same time, I've seen people who are like, dude, the fire's over there. That's where I'm needed. I'm running towards the fire to try to do what I can. It's this phenomenal experience where you start to see planners. I had a giga church, literally 20,000 member church, physical locations. Their online pastor said to me the other day, man, I wish I was at a church plant right now where I could be doing tangible ministry. Because he's even recognizing, which is scary, and I kind of had to work with him a little bit, but he's seeing this point of, okay, what's happening at the physical level with the broadcast and all this, that's so far away from the relationships, and you have to work really hard to get into those tangible relationships. And that's really where a lot of the church online, the relationships, that's where the life change and the discipleship comes in. Small churches, church plants have a huge opportunity in the time ahead to utilize technology in a real way. I don't know that they really realized it beforehand, but I know a lot of churches are learning it kind of in this season.
Yeah. And just to throw this in on the flip side, like I heard from some folks that how disappointed they were that their churches weren't offering anything here locally in Miami, how almost disenfranchised they felt. Like they felt so isolated as a result of it. And these are older, elderly folks. You know, their churches weren't even offering, you know, the people that you thought, oh, well, those folks might not necessarily be into church online or whatever else. They felt alone in the fact that their church wasn't offering any opportunity for them to engage online. And they were coming to us saying, hey, we're going to be watching your services in this time because we have nothing else. And I almost wanted to pick up that pastor's phone and be like, hey, man, can you please just record yourself for this poor old lady here? Like, because she wants to be part of your church. She still wants to be tied in there, but you're not providing that opportunity for her. Like, that's a shame.
I've heard that from a couple people just looking at pausing. And I do think it's overwhelming when you think about doing church online, and especially if you think of it as an all or nothing type of initiative. Mm-hmm. We've been talking a lot about the ideas that there's like kind of 4 pillars of how you kind of do it. It's you have large gatherings online, you have small gatherings online, you have one-on-one connections, and you have self-guided kind of opportunities. And your church needs to do all those. And you as the pastor don't need to do it all, but you need to encourage your key people and your small groups and the people mentoring to use these venues, because ultimately you as the pastor are not doing all the ministry. And so you got to understand some of it. You got to enable your key people to do it. But I do think I do think it calls out, like if you're just streaming, I still believe that it's because your ministry paradigm was so dependent on people being present. And the more you do stuff online, and I know you guys have experienced this, before you do something digital, you have to really think through it, because you have to pre-program it. You got to write out your emails. You got to coach your people. And I think a lot of people, the way they do ministries, people show up and they preach, and then they have these conversations. And sometimes digital kind of calls out all this planning that you have to do. And it is hard. So I'm praying that a lot of people, as the weeks go on, that they get challenged not to be like, not just a pause, and that even the people that are doing small things, that you got to lean into more uncomfortable, like you got to up your game slowly, because this is as the weeks and the months draw on, however long we're in this season, you can't pause, cannot be an answer. It can be an answer for some things, but not for everything.
Yeah, you know, Jay, a conversation that I think that this advanced drastically, and we were highlighting this with our staff the last couple of weeks, was the engagement being the new attendance conversation. To me, this whole thing is advanced this light years ahead, because, you know, everybody's falling in love with the views right now, right? Like, oh man, great. We got awesome views. Hey, everybody's reaching thousands and thousands of people. Wonderful. But the thing that I keep telling them is, all right, but how many connections did we receive that week? How many people are getting plugged into small groups? Because if and when it comes time to transition back to physical locations, like, we need to make sure that people are connected. We need to make sure that they're connected. And even then, in the here and now, if they're going to be cared for, they have to be connected, whether it's in small group, whether they're serving, they have to have some kind of tangible connection to the church. And so we have to hone in on those metrics now and put a greater emphasis on those than we do on the actual view count week to week.
Yeah, so I mean, engagement, at least how I define engagement, it's a two-way conversation. So it's computer user, online attender, engaging in a conversation with the church or someone from the church, to the point that they're no longer just consuming a product, but they're responding and engaging with it in the physical space. There's 3 different models of church. One would be a physical only model of church. One that is, hey, we're just going back to the way that it was in the physical space. There's the other end of the spectrum, and this is one that I've done a lot of talking about, where it's a digital only model, a digital ecclesiology, only in virtual space. It's not dependent on the physical at all. And then there's probably something in between. Call it more phygital. That's the term that Stadia is using right now. It's a mixture of digital and physical, where we're utilizing the physical church, but we're utilizing the digital tools to create a mixed model of it. Ray, we've been on podcast with Eric Geiger. I think Geiger's actually the first person that I ever heard say the word Phygital back when we did this podcast almost a year ago now, man. It's been crazy. Here's my question with all that. Is a physical only in this culture, and I'm not looking for mic drops here, but legitimately, like, is that even going to work? Technology has shifted and adjusted so far.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's probably some churches that still could be physical only and ignore it. But I'm wondering, at some point, is it already gone where a physical only approach, like, they're not going to last? Is there room for it? Am I being too doomsday? I'm open to feedback. What do you guys think? Physical only.
I think you're always going to have outliers in terms of the physical only, that you'll be able to point to that they'll be able to point to themselves and say, you see, we did it without digital, as if there's a gold medal for that. I think those are always going to exist. I don't think it's going to be the norm though. I think within the bell curve of, hey, strictly digital and strictly physical, I think the greater is going to be in the middle where the phygital meets. But within that though, I think you are still going to have some on the outlier side that say, nope, we are not going to podcast. We're not going to put our stuff streaming. We're not going to do any of that. Instead, we're going to make sure that all of our meetings are in physical spaces and environments. I think that it still will happen.
Yeah. And it comes down to, like, each of us are called to reach the people God calls us to reach. So is the question, can people leverage just physical and not digital? Well, of course, there's always going to be counter movements to reach different people. It's kind of like the difference between, Orange County to Los Angeles County to, outside of Seattle. Like every little subculture exists. And, I don't have to like Minecraft for Minecraft to be used and popular. You know what I mean? Like it is, there's so much of the internet that I just don't get. But it's still relevant. I pull up any YouTuber and I get annoyed in a moment, and I'm like, how is this person popular? And it's the point is that, it's the whole thing that's happened with Zoom in the last couple of weeks. Like, Zoom has been around. Many of us have been using Zoom for 5+ years. And the problem with Zoom, what happened in the last couple of weeks, is when 200 million people use it, and 1% of those 2 million people get scared because a third of their people are in China, then there's a backlash on Zoom. And it's like nothing really changed. It just happened to be their audience went berserk. And it's just when you have a large enough people get scared. But I think the reverse is true with the church, is for sure. There's always going to be things that are going to be relevant. And I think there are going to be people that are unreached. And I think it doesn't make sense if you want to reach a lot of people to not use digital, but can you reach people? Yeah. And I still think that will be, it could be a powerful expression, especially as, before this, there were all that stuff going around about how social media and being on your phone and screen time and all this stuff was kind of draining your brain. And the thought was, if you were leaning too much into digital, you were kind of feeding this bad habit and it wasn't mentally healthy. And so I think that will go back. I think whatever we're in, we're going to swing back. Humans are pretty resilient. And I think, everybody thought the world was going to be one way after 9/11. And guess what? Yeah. We went back to that way. I think we're going to go back to our ways after this. There will be some changes, but I think we are, you look through the span of history, we've been through a lot. And eventually we kind of go back to norm. So I don't think that this will drastically change too much. I think it will just lead to people. I think there's a portion of people that probably were going to adopt some digital stuff. I'm curious. The thing I feel like that I think it will impact churches. I think the more remote learning stuff is going to be really interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of people more okay with, like, people working from home, and just like I think a lot of churches just totally, figured that one out. But I don't think it's gonna. I feel like for sure digital is the smartest way to do it, but still people will still not do digital for sure.
We're going to get to the remote learning. Carey Nieuwhof published a thing, and I want us to unpack it here in a second. But I want to come back to your 4 pillars, Jay. And I'm glad you said it, because it was in the back of my mind. I couldn't figure out what the 4 were, but I've loved this. You've got the large group, you've got small group, you've got one-on-one, and then you've got kind of self-led, self-taught systems that are in place. I would suggest pre-coronavirus that church was very good. I say that we were really good at broadcasting services, and we were really good at making sermon archives and some resources available for us, quote unquote, self-taught. I don't know that we were really developing rich funnels in curriculum there, but I think we thought we were good at maybe the large group and the self. I don't think that we had really given much attention to the one-on-one and the small group. I think that we're seeing the small group grow quickly, if nothing else than like situations like Ray, where, hey, we had to get our groups have to meet. This is a long period of time. And now, Ray's telling stories of 90% of their small groups are now funneled into an online environment. And some of those, when the dust settles, some of them may stick online. Some of them may be a hybrid and would love to see some exposure there. I think in this season, I'm hoping that the church is learning there's opportunities for 4 pillars, not just 2. And one thing that I don't even think that we've even realized yet is how to utilize the one-on-one for multiplication, for discipleship, to teach disciple others to the point where they can disciple someone else. So I think there's even opportunities for us to grow in this season where we even are today towards what tomorrow can be. Kind of any thoughts on that? How have you seen the small groups or the one-on-one kind of, what does that look like in your environments?
So for us, the small group has really been transformed in a lot of ways. I mean, we were already doing digital small groups before through Zoom or through Google Hangouts or whatever methods that the group leader wanted to choose. But Jeff, what you're talking about here, I don't even know if we're succeeding in that. I look forward to hearing Jay's answer a little bit more. This is what I was going to highlight is, remember, we spoke to Ed Stetzer a few episodes ago where he talked about the need for the third environment, that churches need like a third environment. And we talked about how digital can become that. And we're finding that we're creating more content, but even I've been coming back and talking to our leadership about creating more community around that third environment, because as such, we kind of become like mini Netflix with the amount of content that we've been churning out, just the need to feed people social, thinking that that's connection. But the reality of it is that the opposite is true, where people need more community kind of engagement. So Jay, what are some things that you guys have done in terms of the one-on-one stuff to get good at that?
Yeah, so for sure, we've had a huge conversion as well. I don't know the percentage of what's happening, but a lot of stuff we were promoting early on was how to convert your existing group to an online group, and then how to join an online group. So I think we spun up a lot of like more robust tutorial videos on how to use Zoom. We spun up a support line so people who were kind of stuck could call in and we could answer questions on whatever. I did one where this lady who was like clearly in her 80s, she did not know how to Zoom. She was trying to do it from her iPad. And, I realized she was editing her Zoom meeting on like her iPad calendar. I was like, oh yeah, that doesn't talk to the Zoom app. You got to go. So it's like those type of things where you're just trying to help people navigate the gap of transition. And because like we're in that, it's the classic, like, what's going to happen when people, like with the Industrial Revolution, we're going to leave people around, the people from the horse to the car, and people get left behind. And we're in one of those digital where you could have survived without digital on some level, because you could have still done stuff. But now those people who hadn't adopted, are being left behind. So we wanted to guide those people. And then it was we spun up a lot of online central groups where large groups could be together, and we would use Zoom breakouts so that people could taste and experience what an online group was before being jumped into starting one or joining one small. But 101, I think a lot of it is around, hey, experience an online group, join an online group. And then the idea is that you could do this same thing one-on-one with people. And I think we've been communicating 2 things. It's, you could do a Zoom, a Skype, or just call people. And this is something that, I've been doing. Like, I did a Zoom with my grandma 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago.
Oh, grandma, that's awesome.
That's so sweet. Yeah. I love it.
And so but it was funny.
What a good grandson.
I know. Yeah. I'm just saying it for brownie points. But it was funny because I said, let's do a Zoom. And I text all my family and stuff, and we did this Zoom. And one of my brothers and his wife live with my grandma right now, and so he was able to be tech support. And we're all able to get on the call. And the cool thing, I have another brother that's in, well, actually he just moved. He's in Missouri outside of St. Louis. And we were able to all be on this call, and we hadn't all been together for like years. And like my nephew and stuff. And it showed the power of this. Like, why weren't we doing this before? Like, we could have done this, but this forced everybody to do it. And I think with my grandma though, we did that Zoom, but I still call her once a week. I call my other grandma too. And so the last couple of weeks, because two things, I know that they're isolated and they have to stay inside, that they're in the demographic, right. They have to, but I just call them. And so I think we're encouraging, you don't have to use complex technology. You could just jump on the phone. And I think a lot of that is just teaching and modeling from the pastor side. It's just going, hey, here's a way you can experience it. Hey, and then we tell them, hey, you need to do it 101. And then lastly, you can use whatever you want. Just old school, call them. You know, earlier today, I was meeting with somebody this morning, and we were trying to do a Zoom call, and their Wi-Fi went down. And it's funny, we called and we did a phone call. And it's like, it doesn't need to be this like complicated thing. Yeah. And I think sometimes we put the bar so high that it's just like, we just like, and this is the whole thing. You guys know this. Our online groups were very agnostic with our technology. So it's just like, meet with your friends, meet with your people. We don't care how you meet. Zoom's a great tool. If it's confusing to you, I don't care. Call, you text each other, whatever. Just you need to meet. And so I think the more we tell those stories, the more we provide environments for them to taste it and experience it, the more people will do it. And I think that's why I would encourage pastors, if you're like, I just don't get online groups, it scares me. If you don't do it, your community won't do it. And your job is, you still want your church to still be a church, and you need to facilitate that. And I think a lot of churches are the catalysts to people figuring it out. They're either experiencing it at work or they're experiencing in their church. And if they start doing it, then guess what? Then they'll go, oh, you know what? I could do this with my family, or I could do this with my neighbors. I could use Zoom. And I think a lot of people are meeting in online groups for their work and for their church, and that's bleeding over to all areas of life, which ultimately leads to people not feeling as isolated, and it leads to a healthy experience. So I think we do have a job to show that this stuff is possible online, and we got to push them, and we got to do it.
Jay, you said something earlier that really intrigued me. You said that you think that things are going to kind of go back to normal, like really, really quick, in terms of the fact that we're going to get back to the way that things were. Why do you think that's the case? And what do you think some of that's going to look like? Like, let's say August, they say, hey guys, we're ready to go back into gatherings of 50 or more on a nationwide scale in the United States. What does that look like to you?
I think if you do not know, so this is the number one thing. There's a lot of people that went streaming the first week or two, and they were measuring numbers. And now week 3, 4, 5 into it, they're seeing a drop. And so I think the narrative is going to be like, wow, that only worked for the first week or two, and now we have a third of wherever we were at. And I think if you don't properly understand the metrics, if you don't properly understand what's going on, then I feel like the data can be spun in any way possible. So another example is that if you don't have a good strategy online right now, and you're not telling people to get into online groups, if you're not launching them, then nobody's going to do it. And you might come out of this, go, you know what, we streamed, but online groups really didn't work. And our people really don't want it because nobody did it. And the question comes down, was that because nobody did it because they really didn't want it? Or was it because your poor leadership, you weren't able to execute it right? And so I think I'm nervous that right now churches are not leveraging digital correctly. And they're going to say, our people don't want a digital strategy because they didn't do it. Yeah. And it really, it's not going to be because they didn't do it. It's because you didn't do it right. And I think it can be a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think I think a lot of people will continue streaming their services. I'm just worried people won't stream more things. They won't lean into online groups. They'll pull back. So like support groups, online support groups, I think make a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people will go, you know what, that was scary. Let's not do that. I don't think you need to make it for everybody, but I still think that like online counseling, online crisis stuff, online support groups, I think that has a place digitally. And maybe it's 20% of your strategy, but I think a lot of people might go, you know what, and pull back. At least that's if I put on my speculative hat, which if you knew anything about my stock investing, you would know that it's probably not worth a lot. But ultimately, I guess that's what I'm feeling. I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I lean a little bit more the optimistic side, and the reason is because, you know, I liken it kind of to what happened when your lead pastor, when Rick Warren came out with purpose-driven church. A lot of churches tried it, and they tried it. They quote unquote tried it. They didn't necessarily give into it. They didn't build systems around it. They didn't really try to move people through each of the 5 purposes. They didn't really do that. And so after, you know, 6 weeks of, hey, we took our church through purpose-driven life, we did X, Y, and Z, and you know what? Our church didn't grow. Well, you still stayed in small groups. You didn't funnel people. You didn't have connections. You didn't have systems in place to move people into the small groups, those who wanted to join, those who wanted to get on board with some of this stuff. You took a lot of people through it who wanted to get on board, but you never really had the systems in place to get them there. So it's not that it didn't work. It's that you weren't really fully dedicated to the system. And so that's kind of where I agree with you in a sense of, yeah, are some people going to be critical of it on the back end? Absolutely. Do I see a lot of other people, kind of like the elderly that we talked about on the front end, transitioning to churches that had a lot of those systems in place though? Absolutely, I do. Because now they're put into care systems where people are actually caring on them and loving on them in that 1-6-7 space, and not just in that hour and 15 or 2 hours on Sunday. Now they've actually got church for real. Like they've got a community of believers that are in their lives that care about them, as opposed to just, well, I sit in the pew and I sing from the hymnal. It's the same hymnal every week, and that's all we got. Now they're actually going to have real people, tangible people in their lives that they can go and visit, that can visit them. And then this is the not so optimistic side. There's still the fear factor of getting sick. There's still that cloud that's going to loom over our nation and over a culture for quite a while, where I think even just going to church and seeing people in masks is going to be enough to freak people out, that they're going to say, you know what, I'd prefer to stay home. I prefer to engage in digital spaces for now until I have some kind of normalcy back. And so even though I agree, like, hey, 9/11, eventually things went back to normal, I still see, because of cultural advancements and because of fear and even because of connection on the positive side, I see a lot of the digital stuff hanging around and sticking.
Well said. Well said. Hey, yeah. So, and I mentioned it briefly, Carey Nieuwhof, and I hate to like quote, well, Carey Nieuwhof said, but it's interesting because actually I had several people email me Carey Nieuwhof's most recent blog. We'll link to it in the show notes. It's like 5 predictions for the future. And honestly, a lot of it has validated a lot of the things that I've been saying. He's talking about how digital church is here to stay. Church online in his context, because when I say digital, I'm far more aggressive towards digital only, but to his context, church online, digital church is here to stay. Daily content was another thing that Carey said in his of how this is the opportunity for church to be 7 days a week. Ray, to your end, I think there's an opportunity not just to be content, but to have community around that. And that's the thing that I think the church, a lesson that I'm learning, even mid-coronavirus here, it's not enough to be content 7 days a week, but to be community. Acts 2, I recently wrote a blog on this last week about how we're content overload, but we're really conversation starved, because we're watching content, but we're not interacting with people. Create community online, not 7 days a week, not just the content. Work environment. I got to tell you, like, I'm looking forward to having this mixed work environment where some at home and some in the office, because I've had plenty of people tell me that they are more productive in home environments as well. This was interesting, and we'll pause here for a second. He saw that multi-site maybe it was going to have an issue here, because people are more likely to stay at home and engage instead of going to some of the multi-site campuses where they're smaller. They can't necessarily afford the 20% drop like a normal church would. Like, what's your spin? And the 5th was sermon, and we can talk about sermon later, but sermon definitely is evolving in this season. But I'm just curious on the multi-site, and I'm not necessarily looking for mic drops either here, but what are y'all's take towards multi-site and maybe struggling in this season?
Yeah, I guess I feel like a lot of our multi-site in our model, and I've seen this in other churches as well, is that, you know, ultimately, like, the larger you are, the more like neutral your language has to come from. It has to feel like it's from this behemoth, because you're ultimately thinking about everybody. And I really have loved a lot of churches that have multi-site expressions thriving, because literally their pastor now has more time than ever to communicate to their community. And so, like, our church was doing stuff daily, and I just loved watching a lot of our campus pastors, like, just go live and upload videos and record stuff from their home and just figure out all that stuff. So I actually, I think ultimately that's the, within your church, the value of the multi-site, depending on if you have live teaching or, a pre-recorded type of thing, a lot of it comes down to that tight-knit community. And ultimately social media and online tactics are really good in that. And so the idea is that I just have my message for our people. And I think if you empower people, I actually think that this is a thriving opportunity. Now, the question is the person who got hired at that multi-site location ready to, to actually be somebody who to leverage these moments? Because I know I noticed that it's like all of a sudden, like, we had some people that weren't really on social media. And now in this time, you have to be on social media. This is the only way you could talk to your people. And that could be uncomfortable. So I do think it's the same way if your multi-site tomorrow went to a live teaching and you were a video, all of a sudden maybe you're not necessarily the person that can handle the live teaching. That's not a skill that you've built up. But I definitely think it's something that is valuable, more valuable at a multi-site level, because you could be more personal, you can kind of express the ethos of whatever your campus is at that level.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jay. I think there's a lot of need, for campus pastors, especially. And we had the same issue where campus pastors, all of our campus pastors had social media accounts. Did they ever leverage them for the sake of connecting with their communities or whatever prior to this? No. And so this was kind of a sharp learning lesson, like a real quick have to hit left and take a turn. And even then we've had to encourage them, all right, but not just content, once again, kind of like we flagged earlier, but also community side. Make sure you're engaging in the comments, that you're talking with people, that you're inviting them to take next steps, that you're doing those things as well. I think that's crucial. But also there's something that I wonder about, because I launched a physical multi-site before I took on this job of being our online pastor. And, looking back a little bit in terms of the expenses that are there, and even then looking forward in the way that some of these dynamics are changing the economy of church, I do wonder how ready churches are going to be to jump into rental spaces for a lot of this, especially where real estate can be so high, when they know the potential for reach through digital avenues, and they know the potential for community building early on onset before launching that physical location. I'm kind of hoping that a lot more churches who are kind of on the edge to transition would merge through some of this with some of the multi-site churches to help alleviate some of that stress, some of the financial burden that's there. Not just because churches like, Christ Fellowship Coral Gables that I helped launch, would have an opportunity, but because, specifically in cities, in areas like New York, LA, where Jay's at, in Orange County, in that area, Miami, where I'm at, where real estate is so huge and so expensive, and it's difficult for churches to stay physically in a space where they can gain from that. That to me is a big deal. And then the last thing, Jeff, and we flagged this before, is the size of the spaces that we think that we need. I think in terms of advancement, we're not going to be building these massive theaters anymore. I think this is going to help advance the fact that we're going to build smaller rooms, but maybe more of them, to help accommodate for the needs of a specific community, recognizing that the digital environments can carry the bulk of the load of larger spaces.
There's certainly opportunities for the physical church to pivot through this, and even to understand, at the campus level, it's far more relational in getting down into that. Even with multi-site churches that I work with, it's the content. Let Central run the content at the campus level. Get relational. Get down and dirty at that level, and understand that we're in the people business at that point. At the campus level, if we're conversation starved, even in this coronavirus season, this is our opportunity to engage at the campuses, to really get into that. So definitely love that. Well, I tell you what, we're going to wrap. This has been a great, once again, it's always a great podcast when Jay Kranda's in the building. Love seeing Jay's face. You have to go to YouTube. By the way, we're on YouTube. We never talk about YouTube, and nobody ever follows me on YouTube. But if you want to see Jay's face through this and see his awesome seminary-like backdrop that's not in an actual library, you go over to YouTube and you can see that and dissect it.
It's so dope.
It is awesome. It's been great. We're just like, raving out over here looking at Jay's theological backdrop. Cool. Hey, so as we're landing the plane here after that awkward moment, hey, Ray, any thoughts as we're landing the plane here?
Yeah, leading into this, I honestly went into this season with a spirit of fear, with the disease and everything kind of looming over us as a heavy cloud, like many of you did, and even kind of watching as to how churches were going to transition into these spaces. I'm super encouraged by the ones that have at least tried. And I think that's something, to be celebrated. Now, coming out of it, are we going to embrace the physical and digital? That's a question that we've all got to answer together, and how we're going to embrace that. I've always been encouraged by how Jay and Jeff have led the way and pioneered in so many ways and providing resources for churches to navigate those questions. And so if you've not yet checked out some of Jay's tools in terms of how to launch small groups online, how to do that, I want to encourage you to just, take about a half hour and plug in with some of those videos and dive into it and start to ask yourself, man, am I concerned with the community aspects of my church right now? Or am I just worried about getting a message out to them every week? Because that community question, that's going to change everything for you in terms of your digital experience. Jay is right in that this could be something that, hey, it's just a fleeting moment for your church unless you leverage it for all of its potential.
Awesome. Well said. By the way, jkranda.com, I think that's the website. Is Jay Kranda your social media? Like, how can people follow up with you, Jay?
Yeah. Just Jay Kranda. Just all the accounts. They're all the same.
Jay Kranda all over the place. What?
There's not a lot of us. So,
hey, you should hit him up on TikTok. Jay Kranda on TikTok.
Oh, I don't even know if I'm on there. That's a good question. I have an account.
Oh, I'm gonna follow.
That's a question.
You told me before you had an account. So you lied in a previous podcast.
Well, I'm calling you today. The question is that I don't know what my username is. So I think I have it. So
all right.
That's a good question. I would say, Jeff, for my closing thought would be to encourage churches and leaders, within those churches, with your leadership, this is the time to experiment with all your ideas. So if you got an idea that you want to experiment with digitally, this is the time to test it, because your leadership is at least got some interest. So do not, if you're like, I want to try out this thing digitally, and you're doing it 6 months from now, you've missed it. You've totally missed the point. So whatever you want to do, try it out and put it under the umbrella or the everything about we're testing this out. So online membership, we want to test out online membership. Hey, can we test this out right now? We're not going to, let's just do small thing. Let's just try it out in a beta form, but this is the time. Make your asks now. Do not wait till later. So I think that would be my encouragement.
Yeah. By the way, if you're not in talking about experimenting and even just getting feedback from others that are on this road, if you're not in a Facebook group, talking through some of the stuff, you really should be. A lot of the best wisdom and experience from guys that are doing this, guys and gals who are doing this, I'm hearing coming out of Facebook groups. So I know I started one the short link is at thechurch.digital/FB for Facebook. And so that'll redirect to one that I'm doing with Stadia. I know there's a online digital tools. And if you hit me up on Facebook, I can point you that way. Kranda.com, man, I don't know how you generate so much like video content on YouTube. I'm always shocked at how much stuff you're turning around, just the one-man shop making that happen. But he's definitely a good follow there with the YouTube stuff. And not to mention, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when I started on this road, I didn't know what I was doing. And Jay was one of the voices for me, honestly, that just started speaking into me and saying, hey, there's this thing called online to offline. Have you heard of it? And honestly, that one philosophy, and whether he takes credit or not for saying it, revolutionized my view of church and others as well. And so you go back to earlier podcasts. If you go back to episode 3, I think was the first with Jay Kranda, the OG. And so you can catch up with that and listen to it. But
as you tell me, the least listened to episode, by the way. You've told me last time we were on. So
I edited this story.
We need more views for it. We need more listens. People, help Jay out. Come on.
Listen, audience, I'm going to be completely honest right now. And this, I cut this out in an earlier podcast because it was inappropriate. But he's brought it up again, so let's actually really tell the story. Jay Kranda is the least listened episode I have at the Church Digital today. I don't think it's related to Jay Kranda, because Jay Kranda, another episode that we did later on, was actually very high. But I launched 4 episodes at the exact same day. When we launched this thing, by the way, our 1-year anniversary is like coming up in a couple days. And so our 1-year anniversary, we're bringing in somebody we're going to launch on Thursday. It's going to be awesome. 1-year anniversary coming up. But with Jay, we launched 4 episodes in a row. Episode 1, episode 2 were heavily listened to. Episode 4, which was the top one in the podcast when people downloaded it, is heavily listened to. My man Jay gets no love whatsoever. Nobody listens to his podcast. I'm like, it's Jay freaking Kranda. Why does nobody listen to this podcast? So
I don't know. I totally thought, like, I texted you a day later. I had an idea of why that happened, but
yeah,
I still, you like it, like it bugged. I know you released a bunch at once, but it still cracks me up. So.
Yeah, it's totally. I should have launched 3. Maybe I should have just launched 2. But I was really excited to do this podcast thing, and I can't believe we made like 60 plus here. This is awesome. 1-year anniversary coming up. So here's what I want you to do, listening audience. Stop this podcast. Go back to your app. Scroll down. Find episode 3, Jay Kranda. By the way, I'm not saying that episode's better than this episode, but it's a really good one. Check it out, listen to it, and just show some love to my friend Jay, so he's no longer the least listened to episode of the Church Digital. I mean, he's too smart to be at the bottom. He really is. Give Jay a chance.
This is a good way to end. This is a good way to end.
This is a great way to end. This is a great way to end. Jay, it was great having you on the podcast. I hope we have many more before you kill Jeff Reed. But yeah.
Awesome. Hey, so for Jay, this is Jeff for the Church Digital. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time here on the podcast. Y'all have a good day.